So welcome everybody to tonight's free talk, and it's very interesting. It's called Ancient Wisdom for Modern Living. Very interesting. Now, Joanna is an extraordinary lady. What she hasn't learned, I don't know. Probably not on a page. Extraordinary, very in-depth and multifaceted, multi-knowledged lady. Where did I meet Joanna? Just not that long ago, actually, a couple of months ago or something, at the amazing event called A Wonderful World of Wellbeing, and it was. You'll have the link to that in on my website too. But so I asked Joanna to come along because I saw she was doing something like astrology, astronomy, and I knew this was something. I just really felt a calling to bring somebody in like this. Now, when I had a chat to Joanna, it wasn't quite that. I got it wrong, but it's something so much more. And I hope you're really going to enjoy tonight's chat, tonight's talk. And Joanna's going to be taking you through a demonstration to how to unlock emotional blockages, which I'm looking forward to as well. So, Joanna, can you just say to us, I'm going to go on mute in a moment, but can I ask you, who are you? Can you just say a little bit about your background and how you got into this ancient wisdom? What's it all about?
Thank you. And feel free to come back in if you think I'm going off the subject a bit, because there's so much we could talk about. Yes. So hello, my name's Joanna, Joanna Bristow-Watkins. So I'm from Harmony Healing. And I guess I wasn't really growing up with alternative healings. My parents didn't go to the doctor very much, but they did go, if they were unwell, that probably would have been what they would choose to do. So it was something I discovered later when I had my children. And I think it was the Childbirth Trust, actually, NCT, when you go along to that before you have your kids, they started talking about, lavender oil and using arnica, homeopathic remedies and stuff. Just got me a little bit interested in it. I'd always had an interest in crystals. I mean, I had a ridiculous collection of crystals all my life, picked up pebbles from the top of mountains and all sorts. So being a bit alternative in that respect, but in other ways, I wasn't particularly brought up with it. So, but I did have a very strange experience. I won't have time to go into it fully now. That is fascinating. But after my dad died, I think I told you, Althea, that he visited me. He visited me a day or so after he died, and we had a long conversation, which was most bizarre. And it wasn't a dream. I wasn't awake. I wasn't asleep. It was something in between. But he came and sat on the bed next to me, and we had a full conversation, and it was very strange. So I think that opened my eyes to the fact that maybe a lot of other things were available that I hadn't really thought about. And I'd never been closed to the idea of reincarnation either. My parents were Christians, but they didn't go to church very often. We went at Christmas to have a nice sing-song. We weren't regular goers, so we weren't sort of for or against that. But again, reincarnation isn't something in the Bible today, but it definitely looks, if you research it, looks as if it was in the Bible until a few hundred years after Jesus died. So this is a non-denominational thing that I do anyway. Okay, so that was my original background. Having got into, I have to do this very quickly because there's so much. I was selling books after my children were born. I was selling books for a company called Dorling Kindersley, which involved selling them at kindergartens and preschools and so on, and events. And before I had my children, I was a public speaker and a skills trainer in the travel industry. Plus, I actually ran a whole chain of travel agencies as well for about 5 or 6 years back in the 90s. So we're going back quite a long time now. But before that, I was a trainer for that industry, a travel skills trainer. So when I was doing this book selling stuff, I was asked to give a presentation about how to be a Dorling Kindersley advisor. And it was the first time I'd done sort of a power suit and big hair since I'd had my kids. So it was quite exciting. Did the talk, it went very well, but a chap came up to me afterwards and he said, "You need some healing." And I was frankly very, very offended and annoyed that he said that, because I didn't know what he meant. I sort of read that as, you're obviously a nervous wreck after that talk and you're broken. So you need repairing. That was how I heard it. But anyway, my shock and horror meant that I was silent, unusual for me. And the guy then said, you obviously would like some healing. So he put his hands, obviously I've got to do it the other way around, but he had his hands coming from behind me over my shoulders. And I was really surprised because I felt a lot. I felt like an albatross that I didn't know was there lifted. It was really tangible, and he only did it for about 5 minutes. And I was blown away. And I said to him, what is that? And he said, it's Reiki. It's Japanese energy healing. I'd never heard of it. We were talking about 1998, probably. So not a million years ago, but, you know, fair long time, 25 years. And because I was so blown away by it, I thought, well, I've got to have more of this. If that's 5 minutes, I need to have a full session. So roll forward a bit. It took me a month or two to find availability to go and see them. In fact, I had them come to my house. That's right. Because I had 2 young kids at the time, I asked them if they would come to me, and they said if I got 8 people, they would, which I did. Quite amazingly, because it was £40 a session then, back in 1998, which was quite a lot of money then. And anyway, they came, they did this healing day. Everybody who I got along really enjoyed it, but I felt absolutely awful afterwards. I had the most god-awful headache for about 4 days. And when I asked them about it, I was thinking to myself, blimey, I paid for this. You know, I've had a whole day of people traipsing in and out, looking after everybody's kids, lunch for 11 people and everything to make it work. And then I felt really awful. And they said, well, don't worry about it. It'll be a healing crisis, right? And that's where everything that you've suppressed for a long, long time all comes up. Doesn't happen to many people. I was one of the lucky or unlucky ones, depending on how you see it. But essentially, what was coming up for me was my father died when I was aged 30, and he died in his sleep. So we really weren't expecting anything to happen. I'd seen him the night before. I'd worked with him the day before, because we used to work at the same company. It was his chain of travel agencies that I was a director of when he died. I had to take it over after he died together with my sister. So I'd seen him, worked with him the day before. I'd spoken to him on the phone that evening, because I'd had a dinner party that night, and so had he, in fact. And then he died in his sleep. So it was a huge shock. And because we had quite a large company at the time, it was turning over about £8 million. We had about 50 staff. And essentially, I couldn't stop holding on. You know, I was suddenly overnight the MD of this company. The chairman and MD had died. And we were predominantly business travel as well. So we had large corporate clients. One of them was Getty Oil, who used to do $1 million a year with us. So I had to hold it together, because otherwise the company would have gone to seed. And furthermore, he actually died in 1990, which was when the Gulf War happened, the first Gulf War, which probably many of you won't remember back to then, but essentially it was a bit like lockdown in as much as nobody was traveling. So it was a really terrible time for the travel industry. And this all happened at once, that I lost my father. I suddenly had to cope with this company that was really going to be struggling because nobody was traveling. We had a lot of money tied up as a family. We were in debt to about £250,000 if we couldn't trade out of it. So I'm not going to go into that. Again, it's an interesting story, but not relevant for tonight. The bottom line is, because I had to keep going, which I did, I just withheld all that stuff. I suppressed it. And when I met this guy in 1998, it's like I was pressing a valve. The valve came out and it all went bleh. So it was pretty uncomfortable, but it was the start of a long journey. That, of course, was Reiki, as I said. That was Japanese healing. Most of you might have heard of Reiki. And I found myself feeling fascinated. I think, you know what? I think if my mother hadn't rung me the next day to say that she had felt the first slight feeling of joy for 40 years, because she struggled a lot with her mental health, my mum. She's been gone since 2002, so 20 odd years now. But she had really struggled with her mental health. And she was one of the 8 that came to my house on the day. And when she said that she'd felt the first tiny feeling of joy for 40 years, I felt I've got to try this again, because personally I felt blinking awful, you know. So the last thing I need is another one of these healings. But I thought, if it's been so good for her, I need to find out more. I went to have a session with my mother at where they lived, which is about 40 miles away. And there was a sign up on the wall. It said, "Learn Reiki 1, £75. And honestly, I sat there thinking, 2 healings, £40 is £80. learn Reiki 1, £75. I should learn it. So that was the original decision. I learned that. It really changed my life. I was almost hoping that my friends wouldn't be very well so I could give them healing. You know, it was like a new toy. Very, very exciting. And it worked. You know, that was the most incredible thing. It worked fantastically well.
And how did this lead you into the Egyptian knowledge and wisdom?
Well, what happened was that he wasn't in favour of me going beyond level 1 quickly. But in fairness, he did say, look, if you feel that you really want to take this further, then, you know, you'll find another teacher and that's okay. He said, each person finds their own teacher. So I looked around, and the next person who I found who was offering Reiki was actually offering something called Seichem. I'll type it in the chat box. This is how they spelt it. It's not how I spell it now, but it was called Seichem, and it was subheaded Egyptian Reiki. And because I'd always had a fascination with Egypt, I thought, well, that's obviously what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn that, which I did. And so I caught up. I had to retake level 1 because it was different. And then I learned this system up to, it's a bit pretentious, but it's called mastery, when you can actually teach it on to other people. And that is the technical term. It's not one I've made up. So I taught this, I learned this Reiki up to mastery level. And towards the end of that, my sister came and caught up. She started training as well, and we did our mastery together. And a year after that, she started writing angel books. She's now had 10 books published and sold nearly 1 million books. So that was the journey for her from there. But at the time, we were both teaching it. We were teaching it together for a while, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was called Tera Mai, this system. I'll write it in there. Tera Mai Sekh Em. Came from a lady in America, and she did have a lineage going back to Dr. Yasui, who was the one who first channeled, if you like, the original Japanese Reiki. Well, probably not the original might be thousands of years ago, but the rediscovery of Reiki at the end of the 1890s, I think. So she caught up. We started teaching this together, and then because she started writing the books, I started doing it more on my own. And even though the system worked fantastically, amazingly, I had such incredible results with the clients, but it frustrated me that the Tera Mai system didn't actually really talk about Egypt at all. It was labelled an Egyptian healing system, but the notes that you got given as part of the course and as a teacher to pass on to your students didn't really mention Egypt, and it didn't even mention the fact that the word Seichem is actually a power word. I'm going to write that down for anybody who's watching. So what these power words are called, I mean, it's like a hekau. So a hekau is the name for a power word in Egyptian. Some of you might recognize that word. It sounds a bit like Hecate, who's one of the Greek deities. And it's also a little bit like the haka, which is what the I think it's the New Zealanders, isn't it? It's the New Zealand rugby team. When they're starting a game, they do this thing where they make really scary faces and shout and scream and make loud noises. And the idea is that they're trying to use power words and power expressions to intimidate the opposition. So it's the same word. It's come from the same stem. And the word Seichem itself, which should really be pronounced Seichem, but that's not what we were taught originally. It means make complete or inner master. And when I found that out, I thought that was so fascinating. I thought, well, I used to be a travel agent, so why don't I go over to Egypt and see what I can find out? And the plan originally was just so that my students would have the Tera Mai Sekh Em notes, and I would add maybe another chapter just about Egyptian philosophies. So that was the plan. And several trips later, probably about half a dozen or more trips later, I'd actually met an oral tradition wisdom keeper over there, and everything changed direction for me then. And I ended up developing my own healing system based on the inspiration that he gave me, if you like. Does anybody have any questions so far? Do you have any Althea, that you think would be?
It's fascinating. I'm loving the sort of the lineage of your the timeline of the what do you call it, the evolvement of your knowledge,
Evolution,
the
whatever.
evolution. That's
Yes,
a good one.
yes.
Of your knowledge.
Because that was about 2002 when I first started going to Egypt. And on that very first trip, while I was away, it was more of a, I'd been to Egypt before as a travel agent 3 times, 4 times. But the first time I went as a pilgrimage, if you like, was in 2002. And about 3 days before the end of the trip, I was there with my sister, who became the angel author. My mother, back in England, died, again unexpectedly. But the really incredible thing was that Andrew and I were going on a very long trip the next day to the middle of Egypt, and it was going to be something like a 6-hour coach trip. And so we had to get up about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we got this call at 11 o'clock at night, Egyptian time, to say that my mother had died. And we'd actually been laughing at the exact moment that she died. We'd been laughing and we didn't know why, at 8 o'clock Egyptian time. And then we found out it was when she died. So it was quite moving, and at least we felt like she was happy to go. Now, I see I've got a question here from Rose about Egyptian healing rods. And I do know about them, Rose, but I don't actually use them myself. So I think that would be a bit of a tangent for me to go off too far talking about those. But what I do know is that they are featured in some of the hieroglyphics and the images. I've got behind me an example of an Egyptian picture, if you like, and some of them do feature things that could easily be Egyptian healing rods. So I think they have a very important history and lineage, if you like. And so if it's something you're interested in, I would definitely follow your nose and find out a little bit more. Yeah, okay. What would you like to know next?
That was great. So I love how you're inspired to add this and add that. So then you wanted to connect to the Egyptian, is it history or the? And I know when I had an amazing session with you, that all sorts of things become angel connections, different deities, and but what was the Egyptian kind of? What interested you about the Egyptian? How did that play into your healing techniques? What was your healing? How did you form your healing technique?
Well, that's a good question, because remember, I'd already learned this Egyptian Reiki, but actually I don't really know why it was called that, because the symbols that you were using to tap into it were all Japanese looking, and it didn't have any reference to Egypt really in the notes. So, but I had already, if you like, got that slight pedigree. So when I went over to Egypt, I was trying to find out about the Egyptian philosophies. And here's another really bizarre thing that might be interesting for those who are listening. Remember, I'd been to Egypt about 4 or 5 times, once, well, several times as a travel agent, and once on a holiday with my husband. And we'd done a Nile cruise together. And I couldn't remember a single thing about the trip when I got back. I'd complete blank about it. And although I was interested in Egypt, I wasn't particularly drawn to go lots of times over there then, right? I've been a lot more since. So what I've established through my own meditations and so on is that I had probably many lives in Egypt, which a lot of people on this call might have had as well, because it's one of the reasons which, you know, as long as you're open to reincarnation, it might be one of the reasons why it's fascinating for you. But I think I'd had some lives where I'd probably come to a sticky end at the end of that time. And my theory is that I would have programmed myself to leave well alone that particular knowledge until the time was right. And clearly when I went with my husband, the time wasn't right, because we went to all these temples down the Nile. I couldn't remember the names of any of them. I couldn't really remember much about any of the deities or anything. And yet when I went the first time on the pilgrimage version, I was encouraged to go by the lady who was running it, and she did a channeling for me from a powerful deity, saying that it was good for my soul to come, that I needed to come. It's a very powerful selling technique, by the way. May have been just that, but it worked anyway. So I ended up going because of her, and actually once I was there, I soaked it up like a sponge. It was so completely different. So the timing obviously wasn't right before, and then it was. So yes, by then I had 2 or 3 trips before I met Hakim, where we went to some very powerful sites. I had an extremely powerful experience in the desert, where I went into a trance and felt something incredible. So I'd had the lead up to it, but then on my third pilgrimage with the same lady, I met Hakim. I'll put his name in here, Hakim Awayan, who died in about 2008. So he was an oral tradition wisdom keeper. He didn't believe in writing things down. Everything was oral for him. And he started to tell me some of the philosophies of Egypt about the deities, and some of it I learned myself subsequently, but he introduced me to the whole concept. But the really big thing that he introduced me to that was the most key, well, two things actually. First of all, some of you may know, if you're interested in Egypt, you may know that the name Egypt is modern. The original land was called Khem. I put it in the chat for anyone who's looking, and you can spell it like this or like this. It's all the same. And so it's actually kind of pronounced Kempt, Kempt. And that's because the T ending denotes feminine. And that's the interesting thing about Khem, was that it was a matriarchal society. So the women's word was carried forth, not the men, not at all what we're taught at school, because of course we have history and not her story, which is what we're talking about here. That the later occupation by the Greeks, which were a patriarchal society, really superimposed that understanding on the previous history, according to Hakim. So that was a really fascinating thing. Now, but the thing that was really a clincher for me, and why I started getting really caught up in it all, if you like, was Hakim told me that we actually have access to 360 different senses. And in the West, we only acknowledge and recognize 5 formally, which is taste, touch, hearing, smell, and sight, right? They're the 5. But many of us on this call may have heard of or experienced clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, claircognizance, telepathy even, and even things like inspiration. You know, they come from something that can't easily be explained by those 5. So if you add those on, maybe we can get up to 10 or 12, but that still, by his definition, leaves another 340 odd senses to be uncovered. And that absolutely hooked me. I thought, well, I need to know what they are, and I need to start opening some. And so because he told me that, I then thought I want to develop something which is actually going to open up my senses, and also other senses in other people as well.
Amazing. So and so then that you learned that in Egypt, and then you brought that back home and started to teach it. Well, there you had your students over there with you.
No, I didn't have any with me at the time. I was over there with the lady who I took students later, but at that point I was a guest on a pilgrimage by the same lady that took me on that first one back in 2002. I went March 2002, September 2002, and March 2003 with her, and then I subsequently made lots of trips on my own. So when I came back from that first trip, Andrew and I had something to show you. If I brought it up, but I didn't bring it in. Okay, does everybody know what an Anch looks like?
I think so. It's like sort of curly
like a cross, but it's like a cross, but it has a kind of, the bottom of the cross is slightly splayed out, if you like, and then at the top it's a circle rather than an actual plain cross. And that was a symbol that we tuned into before we went on that first trip in 2002 that we needed to connect with. So we sometimes call it don't know what to call it really. It was like a consciousness raising experience that we had before we went on that first trip, where we had some insights into, you know, what we were going to get from the trip. And my first thought, even before I met Hakim, when I came back from that first trip, was I'm thinking that I want to change the attunement slightly to more authentically Egyptian shapes and symbols. And you know, that's not something that one should ever take lightly. This was, you know, my sister and I spent a lot of very serious discussions on, is it sensible, is it a good idea, what exactly, how are we going to do that? And as soon as I knew that I was going to be changing the attunements that you get in the Reiki system, then I knew I couldn't call it Tera Mai Seichem anymore. So I had to start calling it something else. That looks more like that's the bottom of one. We can't see all of it there. Great that you found one.
If you scroll up, if you scroll up,
if you click on it, they'll see it.
Yeah, if you scroll up and down, or yeah, click on it.
Yeah, brilliant. That's an Anch. So that was the first sort of discovery, was to add in some more authentically Egyptian symbols. And as soon as I came back from that first trip, I talked to my students. I had some students soon after, and I was telling them this theory that I had some ideas on how to change the attunement, but I wasn't ready to do that. And the students persuaded me to do it there and then, because one of them had actually been told that she couldn't have children. And after her first healing session, she actually got pregnant, and she was heavily pregnant by the time she came on the course. And she said, you know, if you feel it's a good idea, I'd really like to do it. So it kind of pushed me to go further with it than I perhaps would have done if she hadn't said that. So yeah, I started to introduce, if you like, a hybrid system under my own name. It's called Tera Mai initially, and then it was Hakim who suggested I call it Ryad Sekh Em, which is what I call it now, or RSE. It's got a capital E in there. I'll just change that. Oh, it's not letting me do that. Yeah, there we go. So that's my own system. Yeah, so it all sort of came from there, really. Now we're getting towards the time we want to be doing the demo, aren't we?
Definitely. And I just want to bring in, so you know, we're going to go more in, you're going to be talking more about, you know, how do you actually use this knowledge and what sort of things is it used for, but before, perhaps after the demo, but how do you use the ancient festivals? What's the link between the festivals that we celebrate today? What is that link for you? And
Good question. Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm particularly interested in the Celtic and pagan stuff, because if any of you have studied with the Druids and looked into the Celtic beliefs, if you like, it was the indigenous belief here before Christianity came over, and for a lot of Europe actually as well. But friends of mine who are Druid tutors say that there's a lot of Egyptian lore in the Druidic lore as well. So there's a big connection there. And in fact, even up and coming soon is the equinox. It's going to be the autumn equinox here in a couple of weeks. We have an Egyptian festival, the festival of the two lands, is always around the same time. And we find that with all of the major festivals, there's an Egyptian festival that more or less overlaps with it. And interestingly, the Romans seem to have superimposed their own beliefs onto them. Sometimes they change the name of the deities as well. So the deities have morphed over time. But yeah, they reflect very similar festival seasons as well. So the point of it is that these festivals have a really, really long-standing tradition. And so recognizing those and thinking about them on the days that they would have happened, I mean, they have to be guessed a little bit, because we're talking about completely different calendar calculations. So people have to say, well, I think that day would have been around then, you know, so it's not a totally exact science. But it's getting us back into that way of thinking. And it's all about nature. It's all about connecting with the land, particularly with the elements of earth, fire, water and air. So things like the Beltane Fire Festival on the 1st of May is a pagan Celtic festival. By the way, there's no such thing as pagan beliefs. Pagan just means, you know, before whatever was the inherent belief. So the pagan belief in this country was Celtic law, or Gaelic as well for parts of the UK. So, you know, it's getting us back to our roots. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And that sounds great and very useful for today's everyday living, isn't it? And connecting. I mean, as a natural therapist, I've been interested in the herbs and the Celtic herbs and the pagan herbs, nettles and cleavers and so on. And but this is taken to another level, using the festivals as knowledge and an interest, and using it for your own needs, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're at 7:35 just about. Do you want to do the demo?
Yes, so we can do demo in two different ways. So the first thing, you've asked me how the system works. So some of you may be aware of Reiki already, so you'll know that it's about working through the aura, if you like. You don't do any physical manipulation at all. You are working through the auric field. And in the same way as Reiki, what you do, or what I do as a Ryad Sekh Em practitioner, is I tune in to that person who I'm working on. And you described it, I think, in the run up to today on your little bit of blurb. as like a body scan, and that's exactly what I do. So I connect with the person's energy field. I don't actually know quite how I do it. It's so instinctive for me now. But one of my students said it was like I throw a little probe into his heart. I said, well, it sounds a bit painful. He said, no, it's not painful. So, yeah, but it's like
I had an amazing. What sort of quest did you say?
Like a request that you
request.
can I read your energy? It's kind of like happening on that level.
Well, when I had the most amazing treatment with you, I mean, it was like you were coming at me with multiple angles of knowledge and awareness, and one minute it was like a physical thing, and you said there was things going on in my wrist or something, and then you know, gradually as you work with me, you're listening to my story and connecting things, and past lives came into it, and it was just multifaceted, multi-leveled. It was multi-leveled knowledge, I guess, and it was extraordinary.
Well, that's pretty much how it is. So, I mean, I can play it in lots of different ways, but generally I tune into people and I get a story, and you can see that story as a past life thing. But if people don't believe in reincarnation, you can see it as symbols instead, or you can get colours and shapes. So you can kind of play with it as works for the audience, if you like. Okay,
so should we invite someone to come in and to be scanned? Is that what you want?
Yes, I mean, what I was going to say here is if you are prepared to be scanned, it's not painful.
Really
I can't read your thoughts. It's not that worrying. I don't know what you're thinking. But I basically do this body scan where I get a sense of what's going on in your body. And like Althea, pointed out, sometimes it's like I get a physical sensation. That's how it starts for me, somewhere in my body. And then I go into that and stories come up, or I get a little bit more information. So now let me just say that I have no idea what I'm going to say, because until I've actually done that scan, I don't know what I'm going to find. And I have something called claircognizance. That's one of the skills that many of us have as healers and readers. But it means that you say things that you didn't know that you even knew, or you don't know that you're going to say. So I can't filter it. So if you think that you don't want me to be tuning into you and saying things that could be embarrassing, then don't volunteer, right? Because your permission by volunteering is that I'm going to do a scan that's going to be recorded and held on here. So maybe nobody's going to want to accept that, but is there anybody who would like to be scanned? If there isn't anybody who wants to be, then we can do a different sort of demo. No one's keen?
Like to?
Scan normally costs about 75 quid, so it's quite a good offer. Although having said that, it's a very minor version of one, very quick version.
Yeah, it's really interesting, everyone. You know, don't be afraid. It's she's not going to say anything sort of dreadful and not going to show you up and or whatever. But it's extraordinary because it's like it just makes you feel connected to you. You know, it's like just kind of knowing the colours of who you are. You know, your essence of you. And I found it fascinating. And you know, I think one of the first things you said to me was, I mean, you talked to me for a long time about what's going on, what did I want to address, and all that. And we went into great detail. Wonderful listener you are. And I really appreciated that. But then when you started to body scan, I think one of the first things you said was you felt some, I think it was something in my wrist. I think that was on my thumb or something. And physically I wasn't feeling anything. But that was just the beginning. And then you went through different layers and all sorts of details. It's not painful.
Well, the other thing I can do, which is quite fun, and I've done it with big demos as well, is I just tune in to whether there might have been a life where all of us who are on this call were in together. And I mean, that sounds quite contrived, and perhaps it is that I've got a very strong imagination, but in all honesty, people get drawn and called to these things. So if we did have a life where we were all together, then it wouldn't be that surprising if you found yourself on the call now, or you were looking at it later potentially as well. That might be less likely, but it's also possible that people looking at it later might feel something. So it's interesting. Cool. Pardon?
That sounds pretty cool and interesting.
Yeah, it's rather fun. Okay, so as most of you have come because you show an interest in Egypt, let me just see if I can find a life in Egypt that we might have had together. Okay, so I'm seeing a life where several of us were trained as seers. I'm just going to type the word up in here now. That's, you know, you probably heard them as soothsayers. That's another thing, like a truth seer, but it's a visual thing. And we've all trained in Egypt at some point, similar sort of time, maybe not exactly the same time, but over maybe 100 years, a period whereby the training would have been very similar for everybody. So how would you all feel about just tuning into that a little bit if I guide you through what might have happened? Yeah?
I'm up for it. Is everyone okay with that? Do you all feel okay with that? Like a group scanning thing?
Yes. So, okay, so there is some commonality in the group that everybody has issues with the very lower part of this part of, which is really interesting actually, because that's the occipital ridge. That's what's coming up as the common part of the body. And the occipital ridge is the part of the skull that you use when you actually want to induce somebody back into a past life. Doesn't work for everybody. It's got to be something you want to do. But sometimes if I'm sitting behind somebody and they're on the couch, I can put my hands under their head, like so it's like that, right above their head. But you kind of tease your fingers up into this occipital ridge part where the head goes down and then in a bit. That, well, you know, obviously, but I'm just making sure everyone knows. So when you tease that area, you can actually send people into a kind of more receptive state to visit a past life situation. So if you just allow yourself to go into a slightly meditative state, and just imagine now that you're wearing a white gown, flowing gown with a hood that comes right up over your head. It's very, very hot, probably 40 or 50 degrees. You're about 14 years old. We wouldn't all have been, maybe we were all 14 at the same time. Maybe, as I say, we just did this same experimental experience over a similar period of time. And you're just tuning in to how you're going to be working as a seer. And you're walking up to an area which is made of rose quartz. It's like a rose quartz shelf, if you like, of rock. It's quite flat at the top. Beautiful hot day. Well, it has been a hot day. It's actually, the sun's starting to go down now, so it's getting dark, cooling off. And you're going to find your spot on this rose quartz ledge, if you like. You're going to lie down. And amazingly, what's going to happen is you're going to tune in to the stars above you. And the one you're really going to tune into is Sirius, which was known to the Egyptian as the name Sopde. This is how I spell it. They didn't use any any vowels, so you see things spelt very different ways, but that's how it was pronounced, Sopde, their name for Sirius. It's also known as the Sothic. The Sothic year is the year that is based around how long it takes for the Earth to go around Sirius, which is about 26,000 years. Actually, it's a very long cycle. So just imagine yourself looking up now towards Sopde, and then feel yourself connecting directly with that star energy or entity. Feel the energy of that star coming down towards you and reclaiming your connection with her. You have worked with this star before, this star being. And if you're ready to recall some of the amazing knowledge you had in that life, then you will. Is there anybody here who actually gets headaches in that part of their head? You don't have to actually say much other than put something in the chat. Anybody who gets pains there? No? Any other head pains at all? Because I can demonstrate a quick energy drain as well, but we want to go on to questions for the last 15 minutes. So
I get tensions, but not headaches and that.
Okay.
Just tense, you know, computer work and all that.
So just allow yourself, just give yourself permission to recall the ancient knowledge you had, if it's appropriate, in this moment or in the next, maybe after a couple of sleeps. And then when you're ready, just bring yourself back into the here and now, disconnect, but leave a thread, leave a little tiny silver thread connecting you back to that star. So if it's appropriate for you to go back and recall more later, you can go back to that moment. And in the meantime, bring yourself back to the here and now. 11th of September at 7:45 in the evening. Remind yourself of your name. Stamp your feet a bit, maybe turn your head from side to side. It's a very mini connection, that. People may not have felt relaxed enough to have experienced very much. But did anybody get anything that they would like to ask questions about? Did you get anything, Althea, that you might want to share or not?
Yeah, I have a good imagination. I'm very pictorial in my imagination. I went up the steps, laid on that beautiful rose plinth thing, and I felt the rays of the star. What's the name of you?
Sopday, or it's this, yeah.
Sopday.
Sirius it is.
Sirius, and I just felt the powerful rays of colour coming down onto me, and then I started to be Sirius, and it was me, Sirius coming, the rays coming down onto me, and then I was Sirius putting the rays down, so I became Sirius as well, interconnected or switching around, and these just beautiful lines of rays of colour and gold, and it went, first of all it was to my heart and the center parts, and then it was going all the way out to my hands, like it was sort of rebooting or reconfiguring or something. And then I was in Sirius and I started to see animals.
Any animals you recognised?
What's that sort of Egyptian dog they draw all the time on the hieroglyphs, and like an Egyptian dog,
like a jackal?
Like a jackal.
Yes, because Anubis is a jackal. But I mean, that's one other thing that I didn't have a chance to say, which is that most of the names that we use for the Egyptian deities, like Isis, Osiris, I don't know if anybody on the call is familiar with these, but Isis, Osiris are like two of the main ones. You've got Seichem, Ptah, Nefertem, you've got Nephthys, you've got Khem. There's probably at least 20 deities, lots of sun gods, Ra, Aten, Amun, Kepa, Ra, Kepa, Herakti, you know, all these different combinations. So lots of different names, but a lot of the ones that we're familiar with on a day-to-day basis are not actually the names that they used in Khem. They're the adapted names that came about after Alexander the Great brought the Hellenic or Greek influences to the belief system there. And so you get a completely different feel when you work with the deities using their original Cometian names. So Anubis was actually, this is what he's, well, in fact, you can spell it either way. It should really be Anubis, because the Greek spelling is US for male, but we tend to spell it Anubis. This is, remember, because we don't have any vowels in the hieroglyphs, so they're spelt different ways. But the original Cometian name for that same deity would be Anpu. Okay, now somebody has put a question in here now, so I'm just going to have a quick look. I felt calm, like bringing myself back into me. Well, thank you for sharing that. I meditate and I always see eagles and dolphins. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I won't say your name in case you don't want to know, but thank you for sharing. That's really nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, you're put on the spot a bit on a session like this, so it might be that you couldn't really relax enough. You don't know me very well, but I do monthly meditation, because the other thing about connecting with nature is it's really good to connect with the moon cycle. And so I always post about when it's the full moon and the new moon, And I think that post you originally saw of mine, Althea, may have been something to do with the meteorites, because I usually post when there's meteorite showers as well, because these are all ways of connecting with nature through the heavenly bodies. And then, of course, we've got ways of connecting with nature through the plants and trees and animals, which is more earthbound. But all of these are what the ancients used to do. So by making ourselves more aware of our surroundings, I mean, the other thing is to really revere places, especially sacred places. And by going to these sacred places and allowing yourself to just tune in the way that we just did with Sirius. So you just go to a place and you don't have any expectations. You just sit there, you relax. Maybe on a nice day, you just put down a picnic mat, lie down, shut your eyes. Nothing formal that you need to do, but you just put it out there, just the thought that if there's anything that you could learn from this place, that you're open to it. It's a very simple thing to do to start opening up some of these other 360 senses.
Amazing, amazing, Joanna. And can you say, you know, that your knowledge is multifaceted, and can you say how are the ways that you help people, and what sort of things do you help with? What's the different ways that you help? So you mentioned you have the monthly meditation, and it's all about connecting to nature. So what are the different ways that people would want to work with you? What are those things?
Well, I mean, I run courses, so I'm actually running a chemitology course starting later this month. So that's Egyptology with this kind of feel. The twist, if you like, is that it's back to the original beliefs before the Greek involvement. So they can study with me to become a healer, or they can just study a one-off course to just learn a little bit more about that particular topic. I'm also this month starting an Essene angel course as well to learn some of the angel names. That's more of an Israeli thing, because the Essenes was on the Dead Sea. They lived around the Dead Sea 2,000 years ago. But I personally believe that the angelic names like Ra became Raphael. You know, so I could give you lots of examples, but I believe there's a strong connection between the Essene angels and the ancient Egyptian Cometian law. So I teach that as well. I teach how to meditate with crystals and angels as well. And of course, I teach about the violet flame, which is an ancient Egyptian tool of alchemy. So they can learn how to do healing if they want, or they can just simply contact me for a reading. The reading can be an energy scan more privately, obviously, and you can have a reading. Mostly the readings I do completely by distance. So I choose the time, I tune in, and then I send you a recording of what I've felt. They can be done over the internet, but I prefer to do them in my own time, because then I don't know, but it can be done the other way. If people really want the connection, they can. But with regard to actual one-to-one healing, so this is what Althea had. She came, and it's about half a day, wasn't it? Really, it was certainly 2 and a bit hours. So
I was amazed. You know, you really spent time and detail with me, and it was amazing. I really appreciated it.
Well, the body scan is only a small part of it, but it's a very important part of it, because the main difference, actually, sorry, I'm jumping around here. A reading can be a past life reading or an energy scan like we talked about, although they often lead into past life readings, but it can come up, the message can come up in other ways. So with a reading, I just tell you what I see, and then I leave you what you're going to do about it. Are you going to make any changes as a result of what you learned there? But even if you don't, you'll be given some information potentially about a life that might have some metaphorical relationship with what you're going through in this lifetime now. And it could be that it's not actually a past life. It could be an ancestral life. It could be purely my imagination. All I can say is that whatever deities and angelic beings I'm working with are helping me come up with that idea. And almost always, well, I don't really know of any examples where it didn't have any relevance to today's life. So some kind of parallel situation will come up in your own mind, but you can sort that out yourself if you just want the reading. Now, the one-to-one healing, the difference is you get the body scan, but then I actually work on what comes up. So not a doctor, and you know, I'm not able to diagnose what you might have wrong with you or right with you, you know. But it's about checking where the energy doesn't appear to be flowing freely from my perspective, And then we might look again at the past life situation. If the same past life came up in a one-to-one healing, the difference would be that we would then look at that life together and see what we could do to your energy field to resolve whatever you might be carrying forward from that life. And as I said, you know, it may be that it isn't actually a past life, but it's something that whatever spirits I'm working with feel that is the predominant issue to deal with at that time. And so the story is concocted, if you, perhaps, you know, to just get us to the right subject and to give us a discussion point and a process through which to work through it.
When you did the healing session on me, and we went through all those different layers that you said, and then one thing I just remembered that you said that I had a past life where I had all of those things called the braces on the lower legs. Was it braces? Not braces. You know, like polio.
Calipers.
People. Calipers, exactly.
They are like a brace, but you know, supports basically, like supports.
Yeah, so I thought that was a bit weird. Anyway, I'm very open. I'm you know, fine. Okay, I'll take that on board. Let's see what happens with that one. But over the next few days, I had sharp pains running up and down my legs, from my knees down, and that I don't normally have that, but I do have some circulation problems in one of my legs, and it's always annoying. I have to keep rubbing all the time, and yeah, so this was really interesting. And then I had these sharp pains over the next few days, and I just felt that it was all part and parcel of the release of that life, because you showed me how to release from that life, release from that struggle of being some kind of invalid in a past life. And it was what do you call it? It was tangible. It was tangible, and as I got the pain, every now and again I got a shooting pain. Oh gosh, what's that? And that was after your healing. And then when you did that thing about lifting the weight off my shoulders about things, I could literally feel it. It was just subtle, but tangible, real.
A bit like when I felt the guy lifting something off me. Yes, and it's very hard to explain. It's so experiential that it's hard to put it into words, isn't it? And I mean, I hope that those pains in your legs were very temporary and not too uncomfortable.
They were.
Some people feel things, some people don't. But a lot of people look about 10 years younger when they leave. So obviously not very good if you're very young. You might go out as an embryo.
It was fascinating because it gave me a sort of connection to a knowledge that I wasn't consciously aware of. That's what I felt. It was just connected me beyond myself. You know, it was fascinating. And it was real because I could feel it was real. It was when you mentioned these different things, it felt real. You know, like it was true. And yeah, I did feel better, and things change, as you know.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting point because obviously we know that belief plays a big part, but you didn't know me that well, so I suppose it wasn't like you came in as somebody who'd had really, you know, lots of what would you say, bigged me up before you came. So you kind of came with an open mind. But yeah, I mean, it's true to say that once we suggest something, who knows whether your mind then latches onto it. But the really interesting thing is there's lots of research out there, and needs to be a lot more, about the power of the brain and how little bit we actually use, that only a very small part of your brain has to accept that the past life story, if it even is a past life that I've told you, is something to do with something you're struggling with in this lifetime. And that can be enough to reboot you out of the problem. Even if there's no science to it at all or nothing, you know, and if it works, then I'm all for it, really. You know, as long as we're not being dishonest about it and saying, well, you definitely, you know, you were Queen Victoria or something like that. I mean, very often they're very ordinary lives that come up, by the way, but, you know, clearly people will have to have been major people in history. But the whole, when you say, what do you benefit? The benefit of learning these past life stories is not, I mean, it can be for entertainment, of course, and legally that's what we have to say they are. But in reality, it's more about giving yourself an explanation perhaps for why something was like it is, and the idea of it is to then give you some kind of structure by which to move forward from that stalemate, give you the tools. Oh, here we are, something else has come up now. Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay. So, well, the question that's come up here is that somebody said that they'd been told about a life when they were captain of a ship who got stabbed and survived with the injury, but the pain still persists. And that this medium advised her to work with carnelian, which is presumably the stabbing then was quite low down in your body. I would say, because I'm not going to say your name, because I know you had said before that you might be interested, but you didn't want to because it was public. But you do have an issue with your lower spine. It's I don't know if you've ever fallen on your tailbone or anything, fallen off a bottom step or something, or fallen off a horse, or been in some kind of incident where there was some jarring, but your lower back is slightly out. And carnelian would be a good choice actually to work with, because it's the crystal that goes with the root chakra. And if you wanted to work with an angel with it, the angel I would recommend would be Camael. And Camael is also the guardian of Tuesdays. And the planet that it's connected with is Mars. So if you were to add those formulae to working with your carnelian, if you were to just call in, if you're comfortable with angels, you call in the angel Camael, say the name 3 times, Camael, 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 please be with me now and help me to heal this issue from the past life. And if you do it on a Tuesday, it would be even more powerful.
What does she do with Mars?
Well, she needn't do anything with it. It's just a little extra thing I've thrown in. You could try connecting with that planet in the same way as we did with Sirius. The other thing is actually the metal that's associated with that angel in that part of the body is iron, because that is the metal that goes with Mars. All of the planets have their own guardians, and all of the planets have their own metals as well. That's a whole nother science. Or art.
I did say that Joanna was multifaceted, right?
Well, yes, I really know about those because of my sister, you know, because she's written all those books, and she's allergic to selling them. Most authors are more interested in writing than they are selling them, so I do the selling.
Good sister club.
Yes.
Okay, so we've come to the top of the hour. And what I'm going to be doing is going to be sharing this recording with everybody who signed up for it, and it'll be on my webpage for Joanna, so you can contact her and find out more, get in contact for, thank you, Joanna, contact her to go and do training with her, get a healing, or find out more about what she does. I'll be putting all those details to your email after this call, as well as the recording.
And if anybody wants to sign up for the because actually, have I got time to say this? I do a blog. So the blog goes out probably between once and 5 or 6 times a week if there's a lot happening. So like today is a Jain festival, Jain. So I've posted about that. We've got some more festivals coming up this month. Obviously, the equinox is the biggie. There's several Egyptian festivals this month actually as well. So if you want to be notified about these on the days that they happen, then you can sign up to either have my monthly celestial forecast, which is a monthly summary, or you can actually sign up to receive the blogs as they go live. But you obviously get quite a few a week if you do that. But if you're interested, it does keep you in touch with lots of the ancient festivals and things like the new moon and the full moon and the meteorites and so on. Thank you. Sorry.
And that was actually how I got back in touch with you, wasn't it? And got drawn to you. I'm sure I've received your emails for ages and months now. But when I saw this, I think it was the 8th of August. Is that a thing?
Oh, Lion's Gate. Yes.
Lion's Gate.
Yes.
And I was hearing, and I love the synchronicity of things. So I was probably browsing around YouTube as I do, and I was hearing about this Lion's Gate, and then your Lion's Gate's information popped into my email. I thought, well, what's that? I started to read, and just was totally drawn to bring you into a call from that. And that was your monthly celestial, the ancient festivals going on, was it? And there was a lot of things in that.
Well, yes. If you go to that, I've just put the web address there now. So if anybody wants to go to that now. I mean, on Zoom, if they've signed up live and you send them the recording straight away, they'll still be able to see the chat anyway, won't they? But
yes.
If you go to harmonyhealing.co.uk and you click on the blog, you'll see what's just been uploaded was about this Jane festival, but you can scroll back and see what else I do. So yes, I would have posted on the actual 8th of the 8th, I would have posted about the Lionsgate, but at the beginning of August, it would have been quickly covered in the Celestial Forecast Summary as well.
And it's not just about telling people what's going on, it's also what you sort of do with it, isn't it? And your meditations and how to use that knowledge and what you're supposed to do with it. And you take it beyond. It's not just knowing about the festivals, which is I find is already interesting. But it's so multi-connected, isn't it? Because of the angels, because of the planets and the stars, because of the festivals we do on Earth, and ancient festivals going back, as you say, thousands of years, and everything in between. So I'm
doing one for the equinox, actually.
Okay, perfect.
And that will have an Egyptian theme as well, because the day before, as I mentioned, is the Festival of the Two Lands, so it will have a bit of an Egyptian theme. But the equinox, of course, when the night and day are equal, is all about harmonizing as well and moving the body forward into the winter.
Amazing, Joanna. And so I'll put all these details, how to contact Joanna, and do get in touch. It's amazing knowledge and amazing experience with Joanna, and I'm sure you'll be satisfied with the interest and the knowledge that she shares. So if there aren't any more questions before we close? And meanwhile, I just want to say thank you so much, Joanna, for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, and I find it fascinating. It's another level to what I do, and I find it mind-blowing, and just takes you on to another level. And I keep saying that, but I just feel so strongly. It just expands our awareness, and from these ancient cultures that we're all ancestors too, and the stars and the planets, and then angels and past lives. Amazing. So thank you so much, Joanna. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone's got some nuggets out of that and found that interesting. Do you want to over to you, Joanna, if you want to do the close and say what you wanted to finish off?
Oh, thank you. Well, actually, one thing I will just say to finish off is that it's easy to get very disillusioned in today's world, because, you know, we look outside and the world is in a terrible place. Humans as a species are something to be ashamed of most of the time, I feel. So really hold on to the fact that as an individual, by awakening your own spirituality, you do make a difference in this bigger picture. I do have a video talking about that actually as well, if anyone wants to see it. But it's all about the calibration of human consciousness and how we need to get that calibration up in order to move forward from the state that the world's in at the moment. And I really like it because it gives you hope. So yeah, that's my plan, is that just hold on to the fact that you personally can make a difference, even if you're only working on yourself. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Amazing, Joanna. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining. Bye for now.
Bye.